What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be getting just some little miscellaneous jobs done to the D100 today. Trying to get an early start before it just gets way too stupid hot here in Vegas. So we're going to just jump right in and get started. One of the first things I want to do is finish welding in the fuel filler neck. Earlier I had moved my fuel filler from the front of the bed to the back because I had gone and installed a ram charger tank under the back of the bed. So when I did it, I kind of got to a good stopping point on the project, but it needs to get finished welded. So that's one of the first things I'm going to do. So when it comes to doing a patch panel like this, you can see that there's a pretty big gap right here. Let me see if I can zoom in on that. So, I mean, that's a pretty sizable gap. So normally what you'd want to do is use something to place behind that gap to help keep the weld in place while you're trying to close it. So normally you use like what's called a copper spoon. I don't have one. I made one a while back out of an old piece of copper pipe, and it works really well. But the problem is, because of where this is located, I can't get my hand in there, hold this in place while trying to weld with the other hand. It just becomes a mess. So I picked up one of these. What this is, it's a magnet that I'll put up on the back side, and this is just a copper plate that I'll line up behind that gap, and that'll provide some backing for the weld. And with it being copper, weld won't stick to it. So let's get this in place and weld that gap shut. I know, not the best welding job, but it's a hot rod and it tells a story and I kind of like it. So there. So now I'm going to go and finish seam sealing the cover that's on the inside of the bit. Let me just show you. So this was the cover that was actually on the front of the bed that I moved to the back. So I already did some seam sealer, but the gap was pretty big in some spots, so I need to go and do another coat of seam sealer. And then I'm also going to spray the inside behind the fuel filler with some undercoating. And here's the seam sealer I'm going to be using. It's Transtar Ultraflex seam sealer, and then it's just going to go in and try to fill in. You see that gap right there. So just going to redo the whole thing in another coat of seam sealer. Kind of hard to do this with only one hand, trying to hold the camera with one and run the seam sealer with the other. Now that I've got that pretty much done, I'm going to turn my attention now to the gauge cover. So it's the part of the dash that mounts here where the gauge cluster mounts to. And here it is. So when I first got the truck, this thing was in really rough shape. I mean, it was all kinds of just dry rotted, crumbling. There were holes all along the top. So what I did was I fiberglassed the inside and I added, now this is going to be pretty silly, but it worked. You see, I fiberglassed the inside of it and I just used paint stirring sticks embedded in the resin just to give it some added structure. I mean, some of the little mounts here were just so dry rotted and falling off. So I just wrapped them in fiberglass, coated them in resin, and then once that's set up, I bondoed the outside of it and then sanded it smooth. And then I hit it with, then I gave it a coat of, let's see how well this is going to show up here, the SEM texture coating. So I did that just to kind of finish it off. And then I got the bright idea, well, while it turned out pretty good and I was pretty happy with it, I mean, that was like one of the very first things I did to this truck, I decided that I'm going to try to cover it with like a vinyl, like the faux leather vinyl that I used on some of the panels inside the truck. I thought I would try to cover that gauge enclosure, that gauge cluster in that vinyl. Yeah, that did not work. The glue wouldn't adhere to it. It wasn't pretty. It didn't work. So what I'm gonna, so there you can see there's some of that glue residue. So I'm gonna take some time, clean this thing up, and then give it another coat of that texture coating. Once I got the gauge cover kind of all cleaned up, got all that old glue off there and everything, I went ahead and I sprayed it with the SEM texture coating. Overall, turned out pretty good. So that thing will be, once it's dry, that thing will be ready to go once I get all the gauges figured out. Let's see, what else? Oh, I know. So here I've been taking care of the not so glamorous part of this hobby, cleaning and degreasing parts. Working on the bracket for the power steering pump, getting the power steering pump itself all cleaned up. So I know I covered this in a previous video, but I am a huge fan of using dish soap when it comes to degreasing these parts. I like to coat everything in dish soap, let it sit for a while, scrub it down just a bit, and then use the brake cleaner to flush it off. And that seems to really take care of, I'd say, 95% of the junk on these brackets and parts. And then I'll go back and I'll use a wire wheel on a drill and clean it up. Again, not the glamorous part of this hobby or making YouTube videos. You know, it's stuff like this that people just don't show. It's a fact of what we're doing, but it's not the fun and glamorous part. So there you have it. I mean, that's really all I've really been up to, is just taking care of little miscellaneous odds and end type projects for the D100. It's just been way too stupid hot here. I'm sure you can probably hear a fan running in the background. I've actually turned my other fan off in here, and I'm dying. It's hot. So thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe, hit the bell, and hopefully I'll be able to get more content up when it's not so damn hot. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next one.